He imagined scouring untamed land for game and surviving on his own know-how and inventiveness. Though Melvin had heard of Alaska, he had never seen any pictures of the place. Now one lay on the desk before him, the incarnation of all he wanted: the woods, the mountains, the wild, the undiscovered. It was an image that would never fade, one that raised the first ripple in a watery world he knew little about to get to a world he could not forget. This next passage reflects back to the time that Mom was waiting in Arkansas for Dad. And like I said, he didn't get to call her in Punta Arenas, and so weeks were passing, and he had no idea. She had no way to reach him and didn't know what had happened to him. The less than 2 weeks my father had promised to call my mother within had turned into a month. Though Mom kept herself busy in Fort Smith, as each day passed, it grew harder and harder to believe she hadn't heard from Dad due to merely a miscalculation of his arrival time in Punta Arenas. The last time she had talked with him, when he called from Cologne on the Atlantic side of the Panama Canal, he sounded ill. She wondered if he'd even made it through the canal. Her mind churned the possibilities. He could have fallen overboard in rough seas. He could have been hijacked. He could be injured or ill. The Red Dog could have crashed or sunk. Or, recalling my father's encounter with Belize City port officials, the boat could have been seized and he could be somewhere sitting in jail. Though she told herself he was alive and well and would eventually call, that notion wrangled fiercely with the fear that he had simply disappeared in the huge, boundless ocean and that she had no way of going out and finding him. In desperation, she called the U.S. Coast Guard. "We have no indication your husband has crossed the Mexican border into the United States," she was told by a man at the San Diego Coast Guard station. He then gave her the number of the U.S. ambassador in Mexico, who put her in touch with an agent at the Panama Canal. Yes, a Melvin Owens transited the canal in the motor vessel Red Dog on April 24th, the agent said. Because of the canal's slight north-south orientation, when a ship transited the canal from the Pacific to the Atlantic, they said the ship was northbound, and when a ship passed from the Atlantic to the Pacific, as my father did, they said the ship was southbound. He was traveling southbound, the agent said. Southbound, Mom repeated. The words dropped into her thoughts and rattled against her understanding. Hearing from the agent that my father had gone through the canal was good news, but hearing that he was southbound, which to Mom was the wrong direction, caused greater concern.
He was going somewhere she wouldn't know where he'd be.
And then this last passage is after they were lived in Ketchikan for about 25 years, and it's just a little bit about their life there. As year rippled into year after year, my parents' life prior to their arrival in Alaska distanced itself like a one-time visit to a foreign country. They had resided in Ketchikan long enough to see another round of the cycle of life, with the birth of grandchildren and the natural deaths of their own remaining parents, Dad's mother Nellie and Mom's mother Viola, and long enough to see us kids settle deep in our own lives, all married with kids of our own and busy chasing our own dreams. But the many years that passed hampered the day-to-day lives of Mom and Dad only by degrees. Mom continued to paint coastal and wilderness scenes and could often be found with her long fingers poised with a paintbrush against canvas, dabbing colors. Her hands, like those of so many women, have always been those of an artist, stirring, stitching, stuffing, knotting, ironing, washing, holding, patting, and worrying all of her life for the love of her family. And my father, with hammer in hand, continued as he always had, repairing the dock, mending the boardwalks, or building something new onto the house. Always working alone and never calling attention to himself or his accomplishments. He was no different than the fiddlehead fern that grew in the damp woods behind their house, flourishing best when out of direct sunlight, unfurling a zeal for life silently and consistently.
Ladies and gentlemen, you just joined us in progress. Our guest is Nancy Owens Barnes, who has written a book about her father called South to Alaska. And the story is an amazing story. We've talked about it over the last 2 weeks. He built this boat called the Red Dog in his backyard in Arkansas, And upon finishing it, he went down the Arkansas and then the Mississippi River and out into the Gulf and all the way down through the Panama Canal and back up the West Coast and through California into the state of Washington, where he met his wife, and she went on board, and they went all the way to Alaska on this boat and lived there for 27 years. This is the theme of this book, and it's just a delightful story, and we'll have Janelle to pick up there.
Nancy, you're a wonderful storyteller, and you have indeed done your parents proud, so to speak, with your story. But my question now to you is something about charting. What did your father do to learn about the whole charting process? Because when you get out there on the open ocean, it's not easy to keep track of where you are.
Yeah.
So what was he doing? He didn't have, as you said earlier, he didn't have GPS. So what was he doing? Did he do celestial navigation at all? Did he do some navigation with compasses? What kinds of things did he
charts
do?
and compass. Charts and compass is what he used. But he had, the depth sounder on the boat, so that helped him too. But back then, I'm not sure what you call it, but there were beacons, I think, that the radios could connect with and kind of at least give you a general idea of the area you're in.
Navigational aids, I suppose, put out by various Coast Guard.
Yeah, but he
operators.
studied and learned about using charts and compass, and he did that when he needed to do that.
Did you also do some research of your own? Certainly, by the time you were talking with your parents, their memories would have faded as to certain things, as all of our memories do. Did you do additional research on your own?
I did a lot of research on my own, but mainly in the area that Dad was alone, and I had no information, no photographs to really kind of understand his route and what he was seeing as he went along. So I went to the library and plotted his route on a map and studied travel brochures and books on country profiles and that sort of thing. And because I really wanted to imagine what he was seeing, and I wanted the reader hopefully to see that too. So that's how I pulled that narrative together, and hopefully it was successful. I don't know.
It sure was. Arna Reinhardt.
Nancy, did your father keep a travel log? Because as you were reading this and as you were telling us stories about going from place to place to place, and you not being on the boat, how did you collect all that information?
He kept a ship's log, so he recorded every day, a little bit, a paragraph or so, but he recorded, what he was seeing, what problems he had, and that sort of thing, weather conditions, and so I gleaned a lot out of his logs. So that was one of the first things I read through.
And what kind of things would he include in that log? Would he talk about his feelings and how he was doing by himself?
Yeah, to some degree, and a lot of it was about what he fixed himself for dinner that day, which a lot of us would probably never fix ourselves for dinner, and what he did when he ran out of certain groceries. Sometimes he had to use condensed milk for instead of regular milk, and that sort of thing. And but yeah, just kind of about his day, and if he ran into any problems, he would note that in there. But basically just a little ship's diary, and that was really helpful.
We know that at one point he had to return to Galveston and then go again, but just to give an insight of how dedicated he was from the day he left home in Arkansas till he met his wife and then went on to Alaska, how much time passed from the time he left Arkansas till they arrived in Ketchikan?
Just shy of 2 years. They launched the boat in 71 and left in 71, and they arrived, I think it was November 71, and they arrived in Ketchikan in August of 73.
So he was on a trip for 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What a commitment, what
and
a
that's
dedication.
part of also which was making it kind of high tension and desperate, because he wasn't able to work during that time, to bring in more income. So he really wanted to get the boat to Alaska so he could get back to work. And
now in Alaska, once they settled there, what did he do?
He, the day after they arrived there, he went down to the employment office and saw a notice for a job at the spruce mill, which is used to be right downtown. It's not there anymore. And they hired him as a millwright. And he had some job that he did great on, and they said, you're going to be our shop welder. So he said, that's right down my alley. So because he had welded
Sure.
all of the Red Dogs, so he worked there until he retired.
What an amazing story. I can't resist this next question. I have these thoughts from time to time. You started out with, at a certain point, and we already told on the program why you left the boat. And, do you have at times a real wish that you would have made the whole trip with him?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I noted in the book somewhere, Mom and Dad and I, we were like lemmings, marching to the sea. We didn't know what we were doing. We were all very inexperienced, and I failed to recognize at the time that, this is a once in a lifetime, experience. I could go around, this huge trip with my father, and but I was 22. I was still doing things with my friends, and so all of that pretty much escaped me. But yeah, when I think back on it, I thought, missed opportunity.
But again, also your father was really hesitant for you to go after
He
that
was.
experience.
I don't know if he would have gone with just he and I, because he just didn't know what he was getting into, and that was a little scary for him.
Another example of a protective father.
Yeah.
Well, on behalf of our panel and our staff, Nancy Owens Barnes, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for
It's
having
been
me.
a great story. Her book called South to Alaska. Her father built a boat in Arkansas and took it down the Arkansas, Mississippi, all the way down to Panama and back up on the west coast to Alaska. And that took him over 2 years, and he built the boat called the Red Dog. What a great story. Ladies and gentlemen, you can learn more at her website, www.southtoalaska.com. I just have been so inspired by your story, and it's really a good example of how people, if they have a dream and if they have commitment, dedication, and courage, dreams can come true. And although he had many obstacles on this trip, he refused to be defeated. And so that is the victory in the book. And Arlene, congratulations again.
Thank you.
And
Thanks.
we hope it does well.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be with us again next week at the same time. We'll discuss another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.